Commander Lisa Grant stood perfectly still on the bridge of the USS Horizon as she watched the massive alien structure appear on her view screen. The object was enormous and looked like nothing she had ever seen in her entire career as a military officer. It seemed to be made of crystal that glowed with a strange violet light that pulsed like a heartbeat. The structure moved through space with purpose and direction, heading straight toward the human colonies. In the Arcturus sector, where millions of families lived and worked on 17 different planets, Lieutenant Jake Morrison sat at his console and watched his instruments with growing concern. He had been tracking this unknown vessel for the past 3 hours since it entered their patrol zone. The readings made no sense at all because the energy signatures were off the charts and the propulsion system was unlike anything in their database. He turned to look at his commander and spoke in a voice that was carefully controlled despite the fear he felt inside. The object was moving directly toward them, and it was accelerating with each passing minute. Lisa felt her stomach tighten as she processed the information. For 3 long weeks, the deep space monitoring stations scattered across human territory had been tracking this mysterious vessel as it carved a path through the void of space. Every attempt at communication had been ignored completely. All the standard hailing frequencies, all the mathematical sequences designed for first contact, all the peace protocols developed over centuries of human expansion into the cosmos, had been met with absolute silence. The alien vessel simply continued on its course as if humanity did not exist at all. She pressed the button that would activate the ship-wide communication system and gave the order that would change everything. Battle stations. Her crew moved with practiced efficiency as they had trained to do for years. Men and women ran to their positions throughout the massive warship. Shields powered up with a distinctive hum that vibrated through the hull. Weapon systems came online one by one as green lights appeared across the tactical displays. The USS Horizon was a powerful vessel, one of the newest in the human fleet. But Lisa knew deep in her heart that they were facing something far beyond their understanding. Ensign Maya Rodriguez called out from her station with urgency in her young voice. She had detected multiple energy signatures coming from the alien vessel, and her scanners showed that weapon systems were powering up across the entire structure. The crystal construct was preparing to fire, and they had only seconds to make a decision. Lisa's hand moved to the communication panel as she opened every frequency available to them. She transmitted the peace protocols again, sending them out in every known human language and in pure mathematics that any intelligent species should be able to understand. The seconds stretched out like hours. The bridge was silent except for the soft beeping of instruments and the quiet breathing of the crew members who waited for something to happen. The alien vessel continued to approach, and now they could see individual components of its structure in greater detail. It was beautiful in a terrifying way, like a cathedral built by beings who understood physics and engineering on a level that humanity could only dream about. The violet light pulsed faster now, building toward something inevitable. Jake reported that there was no response to their transmissions. His voice was tight with the kind of tension that comes before combat. Lisa had heard that tone many times before in her 6 years commanding the Horizon. She had fought pirates who raided supply convoys and territorial disputes with rival human factions who wanted to claim the same star systems. But this was different in every possible way. This was contact with something truly alien, and it was happening in the worst possible manner. The view screen suddenly flared bright white. Warning sirens screamed throughout the ship with a sound that made hearts race and adrenaline flood through bloodstreams. Lisa shouted the command for evasive maneuvers and gripped her command chair as the Horizon lurched hard to the left. The inertial dampeners struggled to compensate for the violent motion. She gave the order to return fire because her duty was clear and simple. She had to protect the colonies behind them no matter what the cost might be. The battle lasted exactly 17 minutes. The human fleet assembled quickly from patrol vessels and defense platforms scattered across the sector. They fought with desperate courage against an enemy that seemed to know their tactics before they used them. Energy beams tore through the darkness of space and left glowing trails that faded slowly. Shield systems flared bright colors as they absorbed hits and then collapsed when they could take no more damage. 2 human frigates vanished in brilliant explosions that left nothing behind but expanding clouds of superheated plasma and debris. Lisa watched good people die and felt the weight of command crushing down on her shoulders. Then something changed completely. The alien vessel stopped firing without warning. It simply hung motionless in space as if frozen in time. Maya's voice was filled with confusion as she reported that the alien construct was scanning them now. The scans were incredibly deep and penetrating, going through their hull and into their computers and systems. It was reading everything about them, learning everything about who they were and where they came from. The bridge fell into a shocked silence that was broken only by the soft sounds of damaged systems struggling to function. On the view screen, the alien vessel's violet light changed to a different pattern. It pulsed slower now and seemed almost rhythmic, like breathing. Jake whispered that their weapons were powering down and nobody could believe what they were seeing. An enemy that had been trying to destroy them moments ago was suddenly standing down. Every screen on the bridge flickered and then displayed text that made Lisa's breath catch in her throat. The words were in English, rough and blocky as if translated by a computer that was struggling with the language. The message asked a simple question about their origin world designation. Lisa moved to the communication console herself, because this moment was too important to delegate to anyone else. Her fingers trembled slightly as she typed the response that would change human history forever. Earth. We are from Earth. The alien vessel's lights shifted from violet to brilliant blue. More text appeared on the screens, and this time the message was longer. It said that Earth was listed in their database as a pre-contact civilization. The development level was listed as insufficient for void travel. The alien intelligence demanded an explanation for how humans could possibly be traveling between stars. Lisa looked around at her bridge crew and saw her own bewilderment reflected in every face. She transmitted back that she did not understand the confusion. Humans were from Earth. They had been traveling through space for over 200 years. They had colonies on dozens of worlds and a fleet of ships that protected their territory. How could the aliens not know this basic fact? The pause that followed felt like an eternity. Then the view screen changed and displayed an image that made Lisa's blood run cold and her heart stop beating for a moment. It was Earth, but something was terribly wrong with the image. The continents were in the wrong positions. The oceans were a different shade of blue than she remembered from the thousands of times she had looked at pictures of humanity's homeworld. Superimposed over the image was a date that had been translated into human numerals. 2,847 years ago. The next message appeared and Lisa read it with growing horror. The alien database indicated that Earth civilization had been destroyed in a cosmic event. The human species was listed as extinct. The world itself was designated as a quarantine zone. According to their records, humans could not possibly be from Earth because Earth no longer existed as a living world. Lisa felt like reality itself was breaking apart around her. She insisted again that they were from Earth. Current Earth. Living Earth. Humans had evolved there over millions of years. Billions of people lived on the planet right now at this very moment. The alien intelligence had to be wrong about whatever disaster they thought had happened. Another long pause stretched out. When the response finally came, it was a single line of text that would change everything humanity thought it knew about their place in the universe. If Earth survived, then protocol demanded immediate cessation of all hostilities. The aliens would send a diplomatic envoy to meet with them. Something called the Council would want proof of humanity's impossible claim. Lisa stared at the message and felt the weight of history pressing down on her. Whatever came next would define not just her career, but the future of every human being alive. She took a deep breath and prepared to face the unknown. Admiral Henry Carson arrived aboard the heavy cruiser USS Defiance, exactly 3 hours after the alien vessel had ceased its attack. He brought with him a team of scientists, linguists, and historians who had been hastily assembled from every nearby human installation. The alien vessel that called itself Keeper Unit 847 maintained its position in space, neither advancing toward them nor retreating away from them. It simply waited with an infinite patience that only a machine could possess. Lisa met the Admiral in the main briefing room where Dr. Paul Stevens was already working frantically to compile data packets. Paul was the fleet's chief xenobiologist, and he had spent the last 3 hours gathering every piece of information humanity had about Earth. Henry was a tall man in his 60s with silver hair and eyes that carried the weight of too many difficult decisions. He walked into the room and immediately got straight to the point without wasting time on pleasantries. The Admiral said that the situation was unprecedented in every way. The aliens thought humans were ghosts or echoes of a dead civilization that should not exist anymore. Lisa responded that they needed to prove the aliens wrong with hard evidence. Paul activated the holographic display that showed Earth rotating slowly in the center of the room. The planet looked blue and green and achingly familiar to everyone present. He explained that he had compiled everything they could possibly need, including genetic records, cultural archives, planetary surveys, and historical documents that dated all the way back to the 21st century. Dr. Helen Kim spoke up from her position at the table. She was the team's lead linguist and one of the smartest people Lisa had ever met. Helen asked the question that was bothering everyone in the room. What exactly had happened 2,847 years ago? What kind of event did the aliens think had destroyed Earth and killed every human being alive? The question hung in the air because nobody had an answer that made any sense at all. Henry added another question that made everyone uncomfortable. Why was there a specific protocol for what to do if Earth survived? The aliens had a plan ready for this exact situation, which meant they had thought about this possibility before. It meant that Earth was important to them in some way that humans did not yet understand. The implications were staggering and frightening in equal measure. They transmitted the massive data package to Keeper Unit 847 and waited for a response. The alien intelligence took several minutes to process everything they had sent. When it finally responded, the message was simple and direct. It wanted to send an envoy aboard the Horizon for a physical meeting. The alien wanted to see humans face to face and examine their evidence in person. Lisa agreed to the meeting even though every military instinct she possessed screamed at her to refuse. The designated airlock was cleared and prepared for the aliens' arrival. Security teams took positions at a respectful distance with their weapons ready but not aimed. Everyone was nervous because this would be the first time a human being had ever stood in the same room as an intelligent alien life form. The airlock cycled open with a hiss of equalizing pressure, and what emerged was nothing like anyone expected. The envoy was humanoid in basic shape, standing roughly 7 feet tall, but it was clearly a synthetic construct. Its body was made of silver metal that seemed to flow like liquid mercury. Glowing circuitry ran through its form in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Its face was a smooth oval surface with 3 luminous eyes arranged in a triangle pattern. When it spoke, the voice came from speakers embedded in its chest, and the tone was surprisingly gentle and calm. The envoy introduced itself and explained that it served something called the Council of Preserved Worlds. It paused and fixed its 3 eyes on Lisa with an intensity that made her skin crawl. The envoy said that the human claim to be from Earth disturbed their entire understanding of history. Everything the Council knew about the galaxy said that this moment should be impossible. Lisa kept her voice steady and professional as she responded. She told the envoy that humans did not just claim to be from Earth. They could prove it beyond any reasonable doubt. Every person in the fleet carried Earth DNA in every cell of their bodies. Their ships were built from designs that originated on Earth. Their cultures, languages, arts, sciences, and entire civilization stemmed from that one planet orbiting a yellow star. The envoy tilted its head in a gesture that seemed almost human. It explained that the Council's records were considered absolute and infallible. Earth had been catalogued 2,847 standard cycles ago as a developing world that showed great promise. The civilization had been classified as Level 4, which meant primitive spaceflight, nuclear capability, and beginning understanding of quantum mechanics. The Council had marked Earth for observation and potential future contact when humans reached the appropriate level of development. Helen pressed forward with another question. What had happened to Earth after that observation? The envoy's lights dimmed slightly as it prepared to deliver bad news. It spoke a single word that sent chills down everyone's spine. Catastrophe. A gamma ray burst from a nearby stellar collapse had occurred without warning. The radiation wave should have sterilized Earth's surface completely. The ozone layer should have been destroyed. The planet should have been rendered uninhabitable for thousands of years or longer. The envoy continued its explanation in that same gentle voice. When the Council's observation posts had returned to check on Earth after the disaster, they found a barren world. There were no signals coming from the surface. No life remained anywhere on the planet. No survivors could be detected. Earth had been declared lost and removed from the list of developing civilizations. The galaxy had mourned the loss of a species that had shown such potential. The silence in the corridor was complete and heavy. Lisa felt something cold settling deep in her stomach. She insisted that the envoy had to be wrong. Earth was alive right now. Billions of humans lived there at this very moment. They had cities and farms and oceans filled with life. The planet was thriving in ways the ancient humans could never have imagined. The envoy's eyes flickered through a rapid spectrum of colors. It said that what Lisa described should be impossible unless one specific scenario had occurred. If humanity had achieved certain technological thresholds faster than the Council predicted, they might have survived. If they had developed planetary shield technology or evacuation capabilities or deep underground survival systems, they might have endured the disaster that should have killed them all. Paul stepped forward with his tablet in hand. He had been searching through historical records while they talked. He said that human records showed no gamma-ray burst at that time in history. There was no apocalyptic event recorded anywhere. But he hesitated and his face showed confusion. There were references to something called the Great Silence that happened around 800 BCE. Multiple ancient civilizations from that time period reported years of darkness, failed crops and mass migrations of people fleeing from devastated lands. The envoy requested to see those records immediately. They all moved to the briefing room where Paul displayed everything humanity had preserved about that mysterious period of history. Ancient Chinese records spoke of a sun that lost its strength and provided no warmth. Mediterranean cultures recorded years of terrible famine and endless darkness. Ancient astronomers from different parts of Earth had noted strange lights in the sky that lasted for months. The envoy processed the information and its lights pulsed, in what might have been excitement or surprise. It said that the records aligned with what should have happened. A partial gamma-ray burst, deflected perhaps by Earth's magnetic field and weakened by distance, would not sterilize the planet completely. But it would cause catastrophic climate disruption for years or even decades. The Council's automated observers would have detected the radiation spike and assumed total extinction. They would have departed before verifying the actual damage because protocol forbade close observation of dead worlds. Lisa felt anger rising in her chest. She said that the Council had written humanity off as dead. They assumed humans were extinct and never bothered to check back. The envoy's lights dimmed in what might have been shame if such beings could feel that emotion. It explained that the Council did not make contact with pre-spacefaring civilizations under any circumstances. The rule was absolute and allowed no exceptions. Natural development had to occur without interference. The Council would not have returned to check on Earth for another 1,000 cycles at minimum. Henry leaned forward and his voice was hard with barely controlled anger. He said that in the meantime, the Council had almost destroyed humanity today. They had opened fire on human ships and killed good people because they did not believe humans could exist. The envoy fell silent for a long moment. Its lights dimmed further as it acknowledged the terrible truth. The protocols were absolutely clear about unknown vessels in Council space. They were to be neutralized immediately. But there was also Protocol 7, which had been established at the Council's founding. If Earth survived, all hostilities must cease immediately. Earth was special in ways that humans did not yet understand. Helen asked the question that everyone wanted answered. Why was Earth special to the Council? What made one planet so important that there were specific protocols about it? The envoy turned to face her with all three eyes focused on her face. It spoke words that would change everything humans thought they knew about their place in the universe. Earth was the origin point, the first world, the place where everything had begun 4 million years ago. Lisa felt the words hit her like a physical blow that knocked the air from her lungs. She asked what the envoy meant by calling Earth the origin point. The synthetic being moved to the view screen and with a simple gesture filled it with an image of a galaxy that was definitely not their own. The spiral arms were shaped differently and the core glowed, with a strange amber color instead of the familiar white-blue that every human astronomer knew. The envoy began to explain a history that seemed impossible. 4 million cycles ago, beings called the precursors had emerged from Earth. They were human in every way that mattered, though far more advanced than current human civilization could even imagine. They had mastered dimensional travel that let them move between realities. They understood temporal mechanics and could move through time itself. They had learned to manipulate the fundamental forces of reality like artists working with clay. They spread across not just one galaxy but many galaxies, building an empire that spanned dimensions. Paul's hands were shaking so badly that he could barely take notes on his tablet. Henry had gone completely still with only his rigid military bearing keeping him upright. Lisa found her voice first, even though it came out as barely more than a whisper. She said that what the envoy described was impossible. Human civilization was barely 10,000 years old. They had archaeological records that went back to the earliest days. They had fossil evidence showing the slow evolution from primitive ancestors. None of it showed any sign of an advanced spacefaring civilization. The envoy interrupted gently and said that all those records showed one cycle of humanity, but not the first. The precursors had known that their time was ending. Their civilizations had grown old and stagnant after millions of years. Innovation had stopped. Growth had ceased. They made a choice that the Council still debated to this day. They returned to Earth, erased every trace of their presence from the galaxy, and allowed their homeworld to reset completely. Helen pressed her hand flat against the table, and her voice was filled with horror. She asked if the envoy was talking about extinction. Did the precursors kill themselves and their entire civilization? The envoy's display shifted to show beings that seemed to be made of pure light and energy, instead of flesh and bone. It explained that the precursors did not die in any conventional sense. Most of them transcended this dimension entirely, and moved on to higher planes of existence that humans could not yet comprehend, but a few remained behind in synthetic forms like the envoy itself. They stayed to watch over the younger races that emerged in the void left by the precursors. They became the Council of Preserved Worlds, and appointed themselves as guardians of the space the precursors once ruled. Lisa asked about Earth in a voice that was barely audible. The envoy turned back to face them with its 3 eyes glowing softly. Earth had been sacred ground to the precursors. They left it pristine and wiped clean of their presence, but seeded it with the building blocks of life. They wanted humanity to begin again from the very beginning. They wanted humans to evolve naturally without any knowledge of what had come before. They hoped that humanity might one day rediscover the heights they had once achieved, but this time on their own terms through their own efforts and struggles. The envoy continued by explaining why Protocol 7 existed at all. If Earth survived and if humanity reached the stars through natural evolution, it would mean the precursors' final experiment had succeeded. It would prove that humans could achieve greatness without the weight of an inherited empire crushing them. It would show that starting over had been the right choice instead of letting their civilization die slowly in stagnation. Henry's voice was rough with emotion when he finally spoke. He asked if humanity was just some kind of test or experiment. The envoy's lights pulsed in a pattern that might have been sadness. It said that humans were not a test, but rather they were hope itself. When the precursors departed, they left behind hundreds of different species and thousands of civilizations. All of them struggled in the darkness without guidance. The Council had maintained order for 4 million cycles by following the precursors' final instructions. But the Council members were not creators or innovators. They were merely custodians who preserved what existed. If humanity had truly returned to the stars through natural evolution without any help, then perhaps the galaxy could be more than just preserved. Perhaps it could grow and change and become something new again. Jake's voice suddenly crackled over the intercom and interrupted the heavy moment. He apologized for the interruption but said they were getting multiple signals from all over the sector. Ships were arriving from everywhere and the numbers kept increasing. Lisa moved quickly to the bridge with the others following close behind. The view screen showed a sight that made her breath catch in her throat and her heart race. Dozens of vessels were dropping out of faster-than-light travel all around them. Then hundreds more appeared. Then thousands. The envoy explained calmly that these were counselors representing every member race. When it had transmitted confirmation of Earth's survival, it had sent the message on the emergency frequency that reached across the entire galaxy. Every member race of the Council was responding to the call. They were coming to see if the impossible was really true. The ships were incredible in their diversity and strangeness. Some looked like enormous creatures that had evolved to travel through space naturally. Others were geometric constructs made of pure energy that hurt to look at directly. Some were traditional metallic craft, but their designs defied everything humans understood about engineering and physics. They took up positions around the horizon in a formation that was not threatening, but clearly expectant. They were waiting for something. Lisa realized what they wanted with sudden clarity. They wanted to see humans from Earth with their own eyes or sensors or whatever they used to perceive the universe. The envoy confirmed her guess. It said that humans were legend to every race in the galaxy. They were stories told to young ones across 1,000,000 different worlds. The first race, the precursors, gods who had walked among the stars and then chose to become mortal again. Paul laughed, and the sound was slightly hysterical. He said that humans were not gods at all. They were just people who struggled and fought and made terrible mistakes. Humanity had barely managed to avoid destroying itself with nuclear weapons just a few centuries ago. They were flawed and imperfect and often foolish. The envoy agreed immediately. It said that yes, humans were mortal and flawed and imperfect. That was precisely what made this moment so profound and important. Humans were not gods or perfect beings. They had achieved the stars not through inherited knowledge or ancient technology, but through perseverance and ingenuity and refusal to give up. They were everything the precursors had hoped they might become when they made the choice to start over. Henry stepped forward with his admiral's instinct taking control. He asked what happened now. What did the council want from humanity? The envoy's lights pulsed in a pattern that might have been a smile if such a being could smile. It said that the decision was entirely up to humans. The council served Earth and not the reverse. That had been their purpose since the very beginning. They existed to preserve the galaxy until humanity returned. Now that humans had returned and proven themselves through their own efforts, the council had to ask a simple question. What did humanity wish the council to do? The question hung in the air of the bridge like a physical weight. Lisa looked around at her crew and saw the same shock on every face. Jake sat frozen at his console. Maya stared at the assembled alien fleet with her mouth hanging open. Paul was frantically cross-referencing data as if he could find proof that this was all some kind of elaborate dream or hallucination. Lisa finally found her voice and said that the envoy could not seriously expect them to answer such a massive question right now. They were one ship with one commander. This kind of decision needed to involve Earth's actual government and leadership. She was just a military officer who had been in the wrong place at the right time. The envoy said that it understood completely, but it wanted humans to understand that time was a critical factor. The council had maintained order in the galaxy for 4 million cycles by following the precursors' final commands. Now those commands were fulfilled. Without new direction from Earth, the council would dissolve. And without the council maintaining order, the galaxy would descend into chaos within a single generation. Henry moved closer to the display, and his tactical mind was already working on the problem. He asked how many hostile civilizations they were talking about. The envoy brought up a galactic map that showed different colored regions. Green areas were peaceful. Yellow areas were unstable. Red areas showed active conflicts. The envoy explained that there were 47 major powers with significant military capability. There were hundreds of minor factions, including pirates, warlords, and rogue states. The council currently suppressed approximately 200 active conflicts at any given time. Henry asked about humanity's current strength. Paul pulled up the data with hands that still trembled. Humanity had 73 colonized worlds. The total population across all settlements was about 40 billion people. The entire human fleet consisted of maybe 800 military vessels. Most of them were light frigates or patrol craft. Humanity had exactly 12 dreadnoughts. The Horizon was the newest and most advanced ship they had. The numbers were sobering and frightening. Humanity was barely a tiny blip compared to the scope of the galactic civilization that surrounded them. They were children playing with toys while ancient powers watched and waited for their decision. Lisa said that they were not ready for this kind of responsibility. Humanity had barely explored their own local cluster of stars. They did not have the technology or the resources or the experience to guide 10,000 different civilizations. They were still learning how to manage their own colonies without conflict. How could they possibly take on the weight of an entire galaxy? The envoy agreed calmly. It said that humans were correct about not being ready. But humanity had something that the other races did not possess, and that was legitimacy. Humans were the children of Earth. They were the precursors' chosen inheritors, whether they wanted that burden or not. If humans claimed authority over the council, every member race would follow them without question. If humans chose isolation and wanted nothing to do with galactic affairs, the council would respect that decision and manage as best they could. If humans wished for partnership where they learned from the council, while gradually taking on more responsibility, that option was also available. Jake spoke up from his station with uncertainty in his young voice. He asked what would happen if humans were not actually related to these ancient precursors. What if it was just a coincidence that both groups came from the same planet? What if there was no real connection at all? The envoy moved to a console and interfaced directly with the ship's computer system. A genetic sequence appeared on the main screen. It was infinitely complex and spiraled through dimensions that human visualization could barely represent. The envoy explained that this was the precursor genetic baseline. It was stored in every council archive across the galaxy. This was the foundation code from which the first race had emerged millions of years ago. The envoy instructed the computer to compare the precursor sequence with human DNA. Paul gasped out loud as the two sequences overlaid each other on the display. They were not identical because millions of years of evolution had changed many things, but the underlying structure was unmistakable. The fundamental blueprint was the same. The core patterns matched in ways that could not possibly be coincidence. The envoy stated the truth plainly. Humans were the precursors, not metaphorically or symbolically, but genetically and biologically. The precursors had not left Earth behind when they transcended. They had become humanity. They had chosen to start over as mortals and experience existence without the burden of their ancient knowledge. Helen was crying silently with tears streaming down her face. She whispered that all this time humanity had thought they were alone in the universe. They had struggled in the darkness for thousands of years. They had wondered if they would ever find others like themselves. And the truth was that humans had been the first ones all along. They were the origin of everything, the envoy corrected her gently. Humans were not alone and had never been alone. The council had been watching and waiting and hoping for this moment. Every council race knew the stories of the precursors, how they had sung the first songs and painted the first art, how they had asked the first questions about the nature of existence and reality, how they had chosen to give up everything so that life in the galaxy could be more than just their echo. A communication alert sounded across the bridge. Maya checked her console and reported that they were receiving a transmission from Earth Command. Admiral Diane Burke wanted a direct line to speak with Commander Grant immediately. Lisa nodded and moved to the secure channel. Admiral Burke's face appeared on the screen. Even through the light years of distance, Lisa could see the strain and exhaustion on the older woman's features. Burke asked what was happening out there without any pleasantries. She said that Earth Command had reports of alien fleets and first contact protocols. There were claims that humans were descended from ancient space gods. She demanded to know if any of it was true, or if someone had lost their mind. Lisa took a deep breath and said that everything was true. She said that the situation was bigger than anything humanity had ever imagined. They needed immediate guidance from Earth's leadership, because the decision they faced would affect every human being alive and every generation yet to come. Over the next 3 hours, Lisa and Henry and Paul briefed Earth Command on everything they had learned. Scientists were pulled from universities in the middle of their lectures. Politicians were dragged from their beds in different time zones. Historians consulted ancient texts and records. The debate raged across Earth and every human colony as people processed the impossible truth. Some argued for claiming the Council's authority immediately. They said it was humanity's birthright and they should seize it. Others insisted on extreme caution. They wanted to study the situation for years or decades before committing to anything. A few suggested rejecting the entire situation. They wanted to maintain human independence regardless of ancient bloodlines or cosmic responsibility. Lisa stood on the bridge and watched the debate unfold on multiple screens. Different committees argued different points. Cultural representatives worried about losing human identity. Military advisors calculated the strategic implications. Scientists wanted access to council technology and knowledge. Religious leaders debated what this meant for human spirituality and purpose. The hours dragged on. The alien fleets maintained their positions around the horizon. The envoy waited patiently in the briefing room. Lisa felt the weight of billions of eyes upon her even though she was just the messenger. She had not asked for this role. She had simply been the one on patrol when the alien vessel arrived. Finally, as the horizon's chronometer marked the 6th hour since the envoy's arrival, Admiral Burke made the decision. Her face appeared on the main screen and she looked older than Lisa had ever seen her. Burke said that Commander Grant was their representative on the scene. Earth Command was giving her the authority to deliver humanity's response. The vote had been taken across all the major governments and colonies. The decision was nearly unanimous. Lisa straightened her uniform and asked what their orders were. Burke took a visible breath and spoke the words that would define humanity's future. She said that Earth chose partnership, Not rulership, because humans were not ready for that and might never be ready. But humanity would not abandon their cousins to chaos. If the Council would accept humans as equals and as students willing to learn, then yes. If the Council would eventually accept humans as partners willing to share the burden of maintaining galactic peace, then yes. Humanity accepted the responsibility that came with their heritage. Lisa felt something tight in her chest finally release. It was the right choice. Not the easy choice, but the right one. She turned to face the envoy and asked if it had heard the transmission. The envoy's lights shifted to a warm golden color. It said that the Council had heard and that they rejoiced. There was much work to be done, much to teach and much to learn. But first there would be a ceremony, a welcoming. The envoy asked if Lisa and her crew would come to the Council's heart and speak for humanity before the assembled races. Lisa looked at Henry, who nodded firmly. She looked at her crew, who stood straighter and ready for whatever came next. She thought about Earth, that small blue world in the darkness. She thought about all the humans who had struggled and dreamed and reached for the stars without ever knowing what awaited them in the void. She thought about the precursors who had given up everything for the chance that humanity might succeed. Lisa said yes. They would come. The envoy's lights pulsed with what could only be joy. It said that transport would be arranged. They would travel to a place called Sanctuary. It was the heart of the Council. It was the place where the precursors had held their final gathering before they transcended. It was the most sacred location in the galaxy, and it had been waiting for humans to return for 4 million years. The bridge crew began preparations for the journey. Communications were sent back to Earth with updates. Scientists prepared their questions and equipment. Security teams checked their gear, even though they had been assured no weapons would be needed. Lisa stood at the view screen and looked out at the assembled alien fleets. Thousands of ships from hundreds of worlds, all of them waiting for humanity to take the first step into a larger universe. She realized that everything was about to change, not just for her or her crew, but for every human being everywhere. They were no longer alone. They were no longer young upstarts in an empty universe. They were the inheritors of the galaxy's oldest legacy. They were the children who had finally come home. The Horizon's engines powered up. The alien fleets began to form an escort formation around them. The envoy returned to its vessel, and humanity took its first official step into galactic society as the recognized descendants of the precursors. Whatever came next would be written in the stars themselves. The place called Sanctuary existed in a location that Paul insisted should not be possible, according to every law of physics he understood. It was a pocket dimension that had been stabilized at the intersection of 17 different star systems. The Horizon passed through the dimensional gateway, and Lisa felt reality too. In ways that made her stomach lurch and her inner ear scream in protest. She gripped her command chair and tried not to be sick as the laws of normal space bent around them. Then they were through the gateway, and the view screen showed something that defied description. Sanctuary was a constructed world unlike anything in human experience or imagination. It was a ring structure the size of an entire solar orbit that surrounded a captured star. But calling it just a structure failed to capture what it truly was. It was art on a cosmic scale. Gardens that spanned areas the size of continents stretched across the inner surface. Cities made of crystalline towers rose kilometers into the air. Oceans floated in perfect spheres held by forces that ignored gravity completely. And everywhere there were ships. Thousands upon thousands of vessels representing races from across the galaxy. All of them had gathered here for this single moment in history. The envoy stood beside Lisa on the bridge and spoke in its gentle, synthesized voice. It said that the Council had waited 4 million cycles for humans to come to Sanctuary. Lisa was the first human to stand here since the precursors had departed at the end of their age. The weight of that statement pressed down on her shoulders like a physical burden. The Horizon was guided to a landing platform that was large enough to hold 100 ships of their size. As they descended through the artificial atmosphere, Lisa could see crowds gathering below. Beings of every conceivable shape and form were assembling to watch their arrival. Some walked on legs while others floated or flew. Some were clearly organic while others appeared to be machines or energy beings. The diversity was staggering and beautiful and terrifying all at once. Lisa turned to her crew and said that she could not do this. She was just a fleet commander and not a diplomat. She was not qualified to represent all of humanity in front of the entire galaxy. Her voice shook slightly despite her best efforts to stay calm. Henry placed a firm hand on her shoulder. He said that she was what they had and she had done well so far. He told her to remember that humans were not here to rule over anyone. They were here to meet family they did not know they had. That simple thought helped steady her nerves. Lisa gathered her senior staff, which included Henry, Paul, Helen, Jake, and Maya. The envoy had provided them with translation devices that were tiny crystals designed to interface directly with their neural pathways. The technology was far beyond anything human science had achieved. Lisa asked her team if they were ready. Paul admitted honestly that he was absolutely not ready, but they should do it anyway. His words made everyone smile despite their nervousness. The airlock opened and they stepped out onto Sanctuary. The sound hit them first like a wave of pressure. It was a harmonious tone that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. It rose from the assembled masses of alien beings. The sound was not quite singing, but something close to it. It was a welcoming that transcended language and spoke directly to something deep in the human soul. Then they saw the beings themselves up close. Lisa had to consciously prevent her jaw from dropping open. There were humanoids that looked almost familiar. There were beings of living crystal that refracted light into rainbow patterns. There were entities that seemed to be made of pure light and energy. There were creatures that defied any attempt at categorization or description, and all of them were watching the humans with expressions that, despite their alien features, were unmistakably hopeful. The envoy led them down a pathway that opened through the crowd. As they walked, Lisa noticed something that made her deeply uncomfortable. Many of the aliens were touching the ground where the humans walked. Some were kneeling down. Others were bowing low. Jake whispered that they were worshipping the humans. His voice was filled with horror at the thought. Helen corrected him quietly. She said they were not worshipping but rather honoring them. There was an important difference between the two concepts. Lisa hoped Helen was right because the idea of being worshipped made her skin crawl. The path led to a platform at the center of the massive gathering space. Waiting there were 7 beings that were each radically different from the others. Lisa realized these must be the senior counselors who led the different factions. One stepped forward and Lisa tried not to stare. It looked like an enormous mantis made of what appeared to be living mercury. Its surface flowed and shifted constantly. When it spoke, the translation crystal rendered the words perfectly clear in Lisa's mind. The being introduced itself as Counselor Thane, who held the position of first speaker of the preserved worlds. On behalf of all member races across the galaxy, Thane welcomed the children of Earth. The counselor said they had maintained humanity's heritage and guarded their legacy. They had prayed for this return. The galaxy had been darker and lonelier without humans among the stars. Lisa felt the weight of billions of eyes upon her. Not just the beings physically present, but countless others watching through broadcasts and quantum links across the entire galaxy. She thought about what to say and how to represent her entire species in this crucial moment. She considered grand speeches and formal declarations. Then she decided to simply tell the truth as plainly as she could. Lisa said that humans had not known any of this history. For thousands of years they had looked at the stars and wondered if they were alone in the universe. They had fought among themselves over resources and territory and ideology. They had struggled just to survive. They had made terrible mistakes and learned from them slowly and painfully. Humans were not the precursors. They did not have ancient knowledge or incredible power. They were just humans who were flawed and curious and stubborn. They had refused to accept that Earth was all there was to existence. She paused and looked at the assembled beings from 1,000 different worlds. She said that the Council claimed to have guarded humanity's legacy, and she thanked them for that service. But the truth was that humans did not want to be rulers or gods to anyone. They wanted to be friends and partners and students. If the Council would teach them, humans would learn eagerly. If the Council would accept them, humans would stand beside them. Not because of what the precursors had been, but because of what they could all become together. The silence that followed was absolute, and stretched for what felt like forever. Lisa felt her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone could hear it. She wondered if she had said the wrong thing. She wondered if she had failed humanity at the most important moment in their history. Then Counselor Thane moved forward. The gesture it made was universally understood across species and cultures. It extended what served as its hand. Thane said that the Council had been created as servants. The precursors had made them to tend the galaxy while the humans were gone. For 4 million cycles, they had followed the final instructions left to them. They had waited for a purpose beyond mere preservation. The humans offered them something they had never dared to imagine. Not masters to obey, but equals to walk beside. Not gods to serve, but companions to share the journey. The counselor's mercurial surface rippled with visible emotion. Thane said that the precursors' last gift had been their choice of mortality. Their decision to begin again as something more humble and real. Now the council finally understood the wisdom of that choice. The precursors had wanted the next age of the galaxy to be built not on empire, but on partnership. Lisa reached out and clasped the offered appendage. It was cool and smooth like metal, but somehow alive under her fingers. She said that they should build that new age together. The harmonious sound rose again from the assembled crowds, but louder this time and filled with joy. The alien beings surged forward in celebration. Within moments, Lisa and her crew were surrounded by beings from 100 worlds. All of them wanted to touch the humans and speak to them and welcome them home. Paul was crying openly as he talked rapidly with a crystal entity about evolutionary biology and genetic drift. Helen had attracted a group of linguists from a dozen species who were all eagerly sharing translation techniques and language structures. Jake and Maya were learning about alien ship designs from pilots who had too many eyes and not enough limbs by human standards. Henry stood beside Lisa as they watched. Their people integrate seamlessly into this strange new galactic community. He said dryly that they were going to need a much bigger fleet. Lisa agreed and laughed. They would need more ships and more people in schools to teach alien languages. They would need embassies and trade agreements and cultural exchanges. They would need everything. Henry said confidently that Earth would rise to the challenge because humans always did. Lisa believed him. Over the following days, the formal ceremonies continued. Treaties were signed between Earth and the Council. Knowledge was exchanged freely in both directions. Humanity took its first real steps into a galactic community that had been waiting millions of years for this moment. The Council formally transitioned from being guardians to being a true coalition. Humanity was not the leader, but rather one voice among many. But it was a voice that carried the weight of history and hope. Lisa stood on the Horizon's bridge one final time before they departed Sanctuary. She looked out at a galaxy that no longer seemed quite so vast or empty or frightening. Somewhere out in that darkness was Earth, that small bee,